I try to do with my man Kirk from What's New Video Games every Monday, and we're asking the question about the Xbox Showcase. Is this a comeback for Xbox? Not a great year for fans. It's been a rough 6 months in 2024. I would say it's been a rough 4 years, even in the gen that we're in, the current generation of console. And I had a lot of praise for the Showcase. If you want to see that, I called it great, but I did have some issues. So if you want to see that coverage, make sure and check that out. I'm going to end that stream and bring everybody over. Kirk, thanks for being here, dude.
Yeah, man. What a fantastic weekend. I think this is a time of year that all of us gamers look forward to, and we didn't get disappointed this go round. I don't think we got spoiled a little bit. So happy to cover it.
Well, an Xbox, in my estimation, they had the biggest event. I kind of said they were going to, and they delivered. Like, there were a lot of people kind of hyping up the event. I even said, I was like, they spent all that money. This event's going to be insane. There's just no way. Yeah. And they did not. I don't think they disappointed. I have some things that disappointed me, but overall, I don't think the event disappointed as a whole package. So I kicked off my monologue today with the games that stood out the most to me. And then I went to the ones that were more in the middle, and then I had some of my criticism about release dates and stuff. And I know you want to interact with some of my criticism, but before we get to that, I want people to know, like, Kirk, what were the standout titles? I'm going to try to pull up the trailers, too, when you're telling us what these are. And chat, as you pile in, hit the heck out of that like button. Let's get those first 100 likes, and I owe you some gifted members. I'll do that in a second. So, Kirk, your kind of standout titles from this event, what were they?
I mean, the thing about the event was that there really were no duds. I think that was the best part about it, is that it covered such a wide net in terms of, like, there weren't really like filler games. Like, even the indies that they brought, like Mixtape or Expedition 33. The title of that name's more complicated, but I'm just gonna call it Expedition 33. Like, those looked great, but obviously coming out with 2 punches to the mouth with Call of Duty and then Doom Dark Ages back to back. I think your point about, the fact that if we had not known that those were going to happen, now that we're in this age of you get all the information ahead of time, how much of a knockout punch those would have been. Mm-hmm. But those really, really impressed me, especially I would say Call of Duty, when that's a franchise that has just over the years, it just seems like it's getting more and more rote, more and more like just kind of a cash grab. There seems to be a lot of like effort being put into evolving that franchise and offering something new and very fun to experience with this new title. So I thought that out of the gate, they really wowed.
Yeah, I do not disagree. I think they took their 2, I would say, strongest sort of trailers. I feel like these trailers were strong, and there are other titles that I think are strong and heavy hitters, but I agree. I think there was like this 1-2 punch right out of the gate. I also included this in my show today. I think putting Phil Spencer in between these 2 titles was a smart play. I consider that a sign of strength after the first 6 months of the year. Not a lot of great news, and then he kind of goes quiet. What did you think about the inclusion of Phil in the show? A lot of people were like, oh, he's going to stay away. We're not going to see Phil. And I was like, I don't think so. I think he'll be there.
I still think I would probably like to see some sort of transitionary period where Sarah Bond basically takes most of the control of Xbox. I think that Phil is kind of diametrically opposed to the new vision that Xbox has. I might personally more identify with what Phil's vision was, and I'm very glad to still see that play it day one on Game Pass after pretty much almost every single trailer, with some exceptions, obviously, because you have some third-party stuff that's just not affiliated with Game Pass at all. Mm-hmm. But I do think that like the Jim Ryan, Phil Spencer era is kind of over, and I think that we've seen a lot of failings under Phil's leadership. So I just think that it's time. Like, I think like a fresh leadership change will help Xbox in the long run. But in no way am I like championing for him to get kicked out the door anytime soon. I mean, whatever they need to do to make that transition as fluid and as beneficial for Xbox to succeed, I'm totally fine with that. But I do think that they'll do better probably if they turn to someone else for leadership. And Sarah Bond seems like the obvious person.
Yeah. Okay, so you got Call of Duty and you got Doom. Was there anything in there that you feel like maybe people aren't mentioning that you thought was was good and deserves some
Definitely.
praise.
Definitely. I think Flintlock, as you pointed out, is probably getting a little bit overlooked and underrated. That's a game that's coming out. Gosh, is it even a month away? It's no more than a month and a half away.
July 18th, yeah.
Yeah, that's from Kepler Interactive, who have been very kind to me in the past. So I'm happy to have this opportunity to throw them some flowers. Great publisher, and the gameplay looks fantastic. We've been calling for third-person games for Xbox. Here is one finally. Love the sort of kind of colonial-looking aesthetic to it, kind of in that Banishers type of wheelhouse, maybe, or the survival game that came out earlier this year that people didn't necessarily like. Not I can't remember what it is now, but it kind of similar aesthetic. And just the gameplay of it looked really good. The gameplay of like most of these games looked really good, especially like combat. I thought combat from that game, and then one that you didn't necessarily like because it's turn-based, but oh man, was it scratching my it was scratching me in the Like a Dragon feels and the Persona feels, was that Expedition 33 game. Graphic fidelity of that game looked so impressive. And then when they went into the combat and the camera kind of like went up by the guy and it had the options that you can select, like with the different buttons and stuff. Oh man, I was like, I can't wait to play this game. This game looks awesome. Unfortunately, that one is slated for 2025, but we want them to take as much time as they need to with these games. Pretty heavily skewed 2025, this showcase, wouldn't you say? Only about 4 or 5 games that are coming later this year, I think.
Yes, because Flintlock's a month away, which we do want to make sure people know. Flintlock's not an Xbox game, but it is at the showcase.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, and it is everywhere. I believe, is Flintlock on Game Pass day and date?
It's day one Game Pass, yes.
Yeah, that's a big win for Xbox to have that hitting in the summer, just helping with that cadence, because, Stalker getting pushed out of the first quarter. Hellblade 2, I don't think really landed with most of the Xbox audience in the way that a game like Flintlock will. I just think it's a little bit more approachable. And in Hellblade 2, I've already kind of said my piece about that. But you are right. A lot of 2025, a lot of games with no release window as well, like no dates whatsoever. And we'll get to that in a moment with some
Well, you just brought up Stalker, which is not 2025. It's this year, and that showing blew my mind. I was not expecting that game to look as good and as gritty and as real. Like, not necessarily photorealistic, but like just real, like grounded. Like graphically, that game really, really spoke to me. It reminded me a lot of the initial Metro Exodus gameplay trailer that we got, which I think they kind of turned all the dials up to 11 on that trailer. The final product, even as a like up-resed, PS5, Xbox Series X version, doesn't quite look as good as that trailer. It's close. You could probably get it looking like that on a high-end PC. That's kind of what the gameplay of Stalker 2 looked like to me. And just the groundedness of it and the authenticity, like it really feels like this is a game that's going to wear on its sleeve like the experience and the sort of heritage and everything of like where this game comes from, like the people who made it, the history of that region. All that seems very much embedded in this game. The gunplay looked fantastic. Like it looks like a game with a lot of unique personality. I think this one is going to cause waves for Xbox, and it is going to be exclusive for a period of time. So this could be like the big win that they really wanted Redfall to be, or they really wanted Forza or Halo to be. Stalker is more of an unsung franchise, but like this game could definitely be a darling come, award season or something. I didn't see anything about that trailer that made me think, oh, this might not be good. Like, I was blown away by how good it looked. I want to play it as soon as it comes out. That game looked fantastic. It might have even been my game of the show, especially because it was so obvious that it was real gameplay that they were showing.
Yeah, I mean, I made mention I would say there's minor degradation. Some of the earlier footage was crazy, like the lighting especially. I was like, there's that. I think people will get that on like a high-end PC, but even with slight degradation to lighting, I do think this is a very good-looking game. I love the tone, and obviously it's Heart of Chernobyl. It brings that haunting, just very melancholy feeling to areas that are war-torn and nuclear fallout. I just think it looks fantastic, and I love the vibe. So I think this one's gonna be a contender. Somebody asked me today, like, game of the year, what do I think? And I was like,
I think it could sneak in. I think it could sneak into the nominees.
I think rewatching it here, I think it could. I do think the year is shaping up to be pretty strong, and this one's going to sneak in, before that November date. AC Shadows is coming in just at the right time too.
Did they announce a date for Stalker?
It's actually had a date for a while, September 5th. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's at the very end of the trailer, and they announced that a while ago because they basically said they had to delay it out of the first quarter, and I think shortly after there, we got a date of September the 5th for this game, which I know was a bummer. I know Xbox wants to have that, one big game per quarter thing, and this was supposed to be the first quarter, which if this would have kicked off the year for Xbox, oh man, I think that would have maybe softened the blow of how there were some people that were disappointed in Hellblade. They thought it was too short. They thought it was more of a tech demo. This game kicking off the year would have been, I think, a much stronger showing for Xbox because I think it appeals to a broader audience. It's a shooter, it's post-apocalyptic and, nuclear fallout. Like, it's got a lot of those themes that people like in games. So I agree with people that this could sneak in and get a Game of the Year nomination.
I think overall that kind of goes towards my kind of thesis for the showcase. I think the title of this video and the thumbnail was this a comeback for Xbox? And my position is that absolutely it was. I think looking back on this year, we're going to say that PlayStation absolutely owned the first half of the year. Like unequivocally, the first half of the year belonged to PlayStation with bangers one after another, like Final Fantasy being exclusive. Rise of the Ronin is an underrated classic, I think we would say, being exclusive. Stellar Blade being exclusive. The way that their marketing and messaging prevailed during the first half of the year. The way that Xboxes stumbled and fumbled even over themselves unnecessarily, like blunders that they didn't really need to have. The awkwardness of that podcast that just came from their own mismanagement of a situation, allowing it to devolve into a crisis. It feels like maybe all that was because they sort of knew that they had all these bullets in the chamber ready to go. And I wonder if the mentality over at Xbox was just, hey, head down, we make it to summer, and then we unload and we show everybody the second half of 2024 belongs to us. And I think that that's what they came out and showed everybody in a year where PlayStation really did not have a presence in Summer Game Fest, when they had what people are arguing is one of the weakest state of plays that they've ever had. Xbox comes out and says, here's more than a couple of games that are coming in the latter part of 2024. This is going to be ours, the second half of this year. 2025, who knows? But I do think that Xbox is going to dominate the picture for the rest of this year. So absolutely, in terms of, if we just want to look at this in terms of 2024 and how much Xbox has stumbled over itself, I think this is a comeback. They're going to come back and level the score during the latter half of this year, and maybe even have the better performance over the whole course of the year. That's yet to be seen. This is just a showcase. Yeah,
I think I wouldn't put a ton of chips on second half of the year just yet, because we know PlayStation's... I told you in the DM, I was like, I feel like they're playing poker, and they don't want to show their cards until September. And I think with the PS5 Pro and a showcase, I feel like they're going to come out swinging. They've been quiet for too long. The showcase last year was incredibly disappointing for people that were wanting that first-party presence. I would not put tons of chips on the table to be like, yeah, man, second half of the year is all Xbox, because...
I know you wouldn't do it.
Well, no, because I'm confident that the PS5 Pro and the PlayStation Showcase is going to keep things in balance. I think PlayStation made a big mistake by not saying anything during Summer Game Fest about how, like, hey, we have a showcase coming. So the state of play comes across as very weak. But I think they've always done that. They keep their cards close to their chest. I also think it's weird, and I want to shift to this now with you, because I've got Indiana Jones up on the board. You know, you were like, hey, that game could maybe get a Game of the Year. We were all like,
say that.
Yeah, you did say that. And I liked this. I feel like it captured the feeling and the essence of the movies. I also feel like it's very inconsistent. There are parts that look great. There are parts that look kind of awkward. And this is one of the ones that I'm baffled why we don't have a hard release date for this yet. Why are there no, like, collector's edition pre-orders? It's Indiana Jones, for crying out loud, and same with Avowed. No hard release date. So if the second half of the year is all Xbox... right now, I'm wondering, when are these games hitting? Why did Avowed's release date leak in an interview and then they deleted it? Like, what's the deal with these games? What do you think is going on here?
I think that you're crying, like you're sounding the alarm a little bit too early on this. I just think that they burned themselves, self-inflicted, with the all these games are coming in 12 months thing that they did in the past. Remember that? And then more than half the games didn't come in 12 months. So I think this is sort of an overreaction to that they're going to be very, very cautious and let their teams have the time that they need. I think they're very confident about all these games coming out in 2024, but why announce a release date for August or October when it actually needs to get delayed until December? It doesn't have to get delayed if you don't actually announce when the release date is. So I think what they're confident about is shipping all of these games, save for maybe one exception, before the year is out. But I can understand if they don't want to necessarily, put the pressure on their teams, their studios, make them crunch. I think all that is in furtherance of like positive type of intentions. So I don't really want to speak out against it in any type of way. I think it's a good thing if they want to make sure that the games are ready to ship when they ship. If they want to make sure that the studios have had the time that they need. And so maybe they think that putting a hard release date on these games is not in furtherance of that. And I would support that if that's how they feel.
I think my only issue with that is we're in the second half of the year, basically. We're halfway through the year right now, and these games are coming out in less than 6 months. Now, obviously, if something's landing in December, that's exactly 6 months. I don't know very many developers that could not give a release date when you're within 4, 5, 6 months of the game coming out. Like, it stands to reason. If Avowed's coming out in November and Indie's coming out in December, that's 5 and 6 months from now. And, my knowledge of developers and how they like to pace things and state things is like, these guys should have dates locked in right now. I'm not saying that it's a problem. It seemed weird to me. It was like incomplete. It's like, you guys are coming out with this clear sign of force and this like, hey, our brand is strong right now. We got a lot of things cooking and a lot of things coming. Why would you not have this very clear boom, boom, boom roadmap of here is Stalker in September, here's Avowed in November, here's Indiana Jones in December? That to me is just this really, really strong, that's a great runway to a showcase that had a lot of 2025 popping up. I mean, a lot of 2025 popping up. So it's like a great way to say, hey, that's all 2025. These games are right around the corner. Here's their release dates.
Well, if you remember early this past spring, we had conversations about how Xbox, unlike PlayStation and Nintendo, almost gives away too much information. Like, they talk too much, and then that ends up creating problems of their own making. And so I think that this may just be a instance of like them putting hard release dates on these games is just relinquishing leverage and flexibility that they aren't incentivized to relinquish. Like, there's nothing necessitating them to provide release dates for these games other than like the consumers, you and I's rabid need for clarity and to know when these games are coming, because we want these games. They look very cool. They look like games that we want to experience. But like, I don't know that they're incentivized to put hard release dates on it, because it only stands to loosen, the leverage and flexibility that they have to sort of orchestrate how they want the latter half of the year to go. Then they're locked in. So maybe they're realizing, we can play the chips on the board for longer rather than locking ourselves into something that we then have to walk back from. Again, I assume it would just be kind of them learning how to play the game, and it feels awkward because they've never really been good at it before. So they're probably not going to be exceptionally good at it now. But what they are maybe learning is that by not tying themselves down to anything, they can still kind of do whatever they want. So they're not really in any type of predicament at the moment, and they might enjoy that.
Yeah, I also think maybe if I were to theorize, Indiana Jones and Avowed aren't multi-plat, so it's not about securing sales. It's about hitting Game Pass and continuing that sort of confidence in the brand and the ecosystem. So it's very possible they are being treated differently. I just wonder, if you're doing physical releases of either game, why would you wait this long? Like, maybe did they have another event planned, something to push those pre-orders? Like, Indiana Jones just seems like a game ripe for a collector's edition that you'd have people pre-ordering. It doesn't seem like a game you'd be waiting and doing like a digital only release. Like, I've had people, so I think it was Eugene theorized that this morning. He's like, well, if you're doing digital only, you're not doing physical like they did with Hellblade, you can kind of wait until the very last minute to announce your release dates, which might go hand in hand with what you're saying, but to not do physical, I think Avowed has a great cover art aesthetic as well, that why would you not do a physical for that?
I mean, they might end up, not that we like it when developers do this necessarily, or publishers more accurately, but they might end up doing what Alan Wake did. Like, I think Alan Wake, right after the announcement of the DLC, announced their collector's edition that you can go online and pre-order now for $200 or whatever it is, and it comes with the fancy box and the map and the art book and everything. And so, like, that's available as, you can only get it, like, the deluxe edition of the game that's going to come with that DLC that dropped on Thursday. So, you know, they had a digital only release, and now they've got that collector's edition. I think Baldur's Gate 3 did something similar, at least with Xbox. So that could be a trend that we're going to see more and more of, is that you get a digital only release. Maybe that's to see if the game sells well. Like, if it doesn't sell well enough, they don't even put the money into, they don't do the sunk cost of the collector's edition. Like, so they want to see if there's demand for it. And then after the game sells well digitally, they'll come out and do the collector's edition. That might be something that we see more of. Not that I necessarily like that, but it may be, preferable for these publishers to do it that way.
Yeah, Alan Wake is doing that. You know, they announced that during Keeley's show. I thought that was a cool announcement, by the way, like the DLC, and I thought that was really, really fun.
Just that whole universe is so awesome, right? Like, what they're doing with that, how wild they're willing to get with the connective timelines and everything. Yeah.
Well, and I'm a fan of Twilight Zone, so I saw the font and immediately was like, oh my gosh, that's Twilight Zone font. What are they doing? You know, they're doing some kind of Twilight Zone thing. So I was extremely excited about that. One of the other criticisms I kind of lobbied against the event was the use of what I can't tell what I'm looking at, and I call it simulated gameplay. I feel that Fable did it again. They heavily leaned on cinematic with a couple of what feel like simulated in-engine. It doesn't feel like a raw gameplay showing. Like, I kept comparing it to South of Midnight. I'm like, South of Midnight, we got uncut, lengthy gameplay. She traversed, she fought, she traversed again. And then when it came to State of Decay 3 as an example, it's been 4 years since we got a cinematic trailer, and we basically got another one. And I personally felt like that was a mistake. It's like, where's the gameplay, especially for Fable? Fable's 1 year away. It's coming in 2025. So is South of Midnight. And look at all the footage we saw of South of Midnight. What are your thoughts on that? My criticism that, this doesn't feel like real gameplay to me. And we'll constantly hear that it is, but I feel like there's a distinct difference between the gameplay we saw in South of Midnight and what we see in State of Decay 3 and Fable's trailers.
Yeah, it was the double A's that really showed up at the showcase with the fantastic raw gameplay, right? Like you mentioned, South of Midnight. Expedition 33 has been playing in the background as you talked about that. Looked fantastic, and that was clearly just gameplay, maybe with a couple flashes and flourishes added to it, but the camera walking behind the character and things like that. And even Mixtape, the gameplay of that looked fantastic. The art style of that looked really great, and you could tell you were just looking at the game. That's the team that made The Artful Escape, so I don't think there's any lack of confidence on them to deliver a quality game as well. As far as what you're talking about, simulated gameplay, I guess what my question would be is, like, what is it that you are fearing, or what is it that you are speculating might be the result of that? Because I guess, like, this isn't something that we're necessarily a stranger to, in terms of, I don't really think of it as simulated gameplay. I think of it as, like, kind of what I was talking about with Metro Exodus earlier in the show, like turning all the dials up to 11. I think we've seen that recurringly. I mean, obviously, most famously, there was the Watch Dogs trailer. Ubisoft does this a lot. The first Division game, they kind of did this as well. Like, people used to call it a graphical downgrade. I'm not sure if that's the terminology anymore. But, like, what they were showing with Watch Dogs and the Division clearly was the game running. It was just probably running on a souped-up rig, and it's a very confined slice of the game that they're showing. And we the same thing happened with Dark Souls 2. It had much better lighting and graphical fidelity than the game ultimately shipped with. Even the remasters of the game on PS4 and Xbox One, because that game was a PS3 game originally, I think, didn't look as good as that initial trailer. So, like, this is nothing that we're a stranger to during E3 season. But it sounds like when you use the word simulated gameplay, and I think you were talking about Perfect Dark as well, which we might want to use that as like the primary example of this.
Yeah.
When you talk about simulated gameplay, like that's almost like they've literally like pre-rendered the entire gameplay sequence and it's not real. Which the
Correct.
only game I can really think of that did that in my mind is like Mirror Edge Catalyst. Like Mirror Edge Catalyst was a really egregious example of that. I bought that game thinking it was going to look like what they showed off in the trailers, and it doesn't at all.
Yeah, I'm rerunning a sequence that I feel is where, to me, this is just kind of blatantly obvious that you don't have raw gameplay to show me. Like, suddenly showing me, like, an over-the-shoulder one shot of a gun, and then you go right back to cinematics. And again, I think it's most obvious to me, the girl on top as she swivels, and then when the next one here, where she moves her arm, it doesn't...
Are we talking about State of Decay?
State of Decay, yeah, I have that running right now. I look at that and think to myself, that doesn't look like real gameplay. It looks totally pre-rendered in-engine, because this whole in-engine debate about, like, people are mad about what Jeff Keighley said about Gears, and this guy went on this big tangent. It's like, we don't know what in-engine means. You guys constantly use this as vernacular for your trailers, and nobody knows. Like, does it mean this is all done in an engine? Okay, you can do tons of things in engine. Remember when the guy went into the Unreal Engine and it looked like he was at a real train station and it was totally fake? That's all in engine. And he said, none of this is running real time. None of this is running raw, but it was all done, quote unquote, in engine. So when I watch a trailer like this and I'm like, okay, I don't know if the game's going to look like that. Look at what was done in engine with the day before. And all of our spidey senses were tingling. We're like, this doesn't look real. This doesn't look genuine. And with a game like Fable especially, I think I hold Fable to a little bit of a different standard than State of Decay. State of Decay, my frustration is you gave us a cinematic 4 years ago. It's been 4 years, and all you have is another cinematic with really quick snippets of what feels like pre-rendered, in-engine, simulated gameplay. And then Fable's a year away.
Hold on. Let me push back on State of Decay 3. I want to give you a little bit of pushback because, like, that game was not even supposed to be here. That game is supposedly, like, having a really tough development. So the fact that they even have something that they're able to present, like people thought that game was scrapped. So, like, the fact that it made an appearance was kind of like an underdog move for that game to show up and be like, no, this is still happening. We're still going to get this across the finish line. It's like, I don't know if you're aware of that. Like people like Jeff Grubb and Greg Miller, like they were hearing like, this one might not make it. Like this one might stay on the cutting room floor. So the criticism is like valid that you're giving it, but also it's like, if the alternative was kind of that this game wasn't going to come out, then I'm happy that it's even showing at all 4 years later and that they're showing some semblance of gameplay or gameplay adjacent footage. Like just the idea that they're going to try to make this game happen and it's going to be their best version of like a online zombie apocalypse type game. Like we don't have any idea if the game will be good or not, but that's like with most games. We don't know. We didn't know if Hellblade 2 was going to be good until you literally sat down with a controller in hand and played it. You were like, I'm not sure. It doesn't look that great. I hope it's good, but we don't really know. So like, I'm just glad that game showed up and it showed us something about like what the experience of playing that game is probably going to be like that looks mildly enjoyable or like palatable. I'm okay with that. I don't know why you're giving that so much criticism, I guess. So I wanted to push back on that.
Well, because that doesn't give me any comfort. Like if a game is having troubled development and you show up after 4 years with another trailer that's largely just cinematic, and then Fable, same deal. It's with Perfect Dark. We heard Perfect Dark was in trouble, and we're not sure if that gameplay was real or not. Because think about it from this perspective. We have a game like South of Midnight that's coming out next year. They had no problem showing lengthy gameplay. Fable is apparently coming out next year, and we can't get a look at lengthy gameplay. We get what I consider to be in-engine simulated gameplay, and they're all really quick snippets. It's like, what's the problem with just showing us a nice chunk of this game, right? Like, show me her going from one point to another and getting into some combat. And then same thing with Perfect Dark. If Perfect Dark's not coming next year, let's say earliest we get Perfect Dark's 2026, how are you able to show me so much gameplay of that game? It doesn't seem consistent. It's like, so Perfect Dark's not coming next year, and we saw an entire sequence of gameplay. Well, that makes me suspicious. It's like, well, was that real?
I agree with that one. I don't want to get too much into Perfect Dark because I think that's outside of my my level of experience. You would probably be able to speak more to that. But yeah, that gameplay sequence was very cyberpunk looking. It seemed so far along. Like that seemed like a game that could come out this year. So I don't know what we were looking at. I don't know. And it was weird kind of how, like, when the gun would shoot, it almost had like a cinematic effect to it where it would kind of like, the camera would kind of like jerk and like shake and like emphasize the impact, and then it would slow down, and then it would go back to fast again until he shot somebody else again. There was a very like orchestrated kind of cinematic quality to that gameplay sequence. And so I don't know. I would prefer to believe that it's real, because my God, did that game look amazing. But you may be onto something with that one. I just think with like State of Decay, like what they showed wasn't so fantastic that I even feel the need to be cynical of it. Like that to me looks like probably what that game's gonna play like, maybe with some graphical downgrades. Like, I don't know why we're looking at that and we're saying, oh, this looks fake. Like, nothing about that looked fake. They could totally make that game.
I'm not saying fake. I'm not saying fake. I'm saying in-engine simulated, as in you can do things in-engine that look way prettier than when the game actually ships, whether it's the lighting, the animations, the shading. It's like once you go and actually have to do it in real time, you have to turn all that stuff off or the game won't run. Like, and watching The Perfect Dark back and thinking through, somebody's like, well, it has UI and everything. It does.
You can fake that.
But I can't help but get Watch Dogs vibes when, like, they were in the city and there's this overlay and you're scanning all these people. Like, to me, it's like, okay, if this game is not a year away, how are you able to show me so much? And then Fable is a year away and you show me so little. It just, to me, I don't want to overbake this cake. It just, to me, is it's like, okay, your bigger titles... Because, like, what you said about State of Decay, well, it was not even supposed to come out. It's trouble. Well, then don't show it to me. Just wait. Keep those cards close to your chest. Like, come out and just knock my socks off with gameplay and be like, hey, this game's coming out next year, instead of, here's another cinematic of State of Decay, and we don't have no clue when it's coming.
I disagree. I think that's just a preferential thing, and you're entitled to have your preference. Absolutely. I have no issue with that. But to say that they shouldn't show it, as anything beyond a preference, I don't agree at all. Like, when there are murmurs that your game might not be coming out at all, and people are looking for clarity, is like, is this still happening? Because this was something that you had advertised in the past was going to be like an offering for Game Pass and for your brand. I think coming out and saying in full force, like, yep, this is still on the cards, we're still working on this, this is going to happen, that's an affirmative and good statement to make. And I would have rather have them done that than it not be present in the showcase, 100%. So I think we just have a preferential disagreement there.
Well, and someone in chat saying Perfect Dark's a year away, it's 2025. I don't see any evidence of They didn't say that in the trailer. I've not seen that stated anywhere, so I don't think it is. I think your bangers next year are Fable, Doom, and what was the other one? It was Fable, Doom, and there was another one that I thought was first party that I'm forgetting. Well, I guess it was. Well, I'm including South of Midnight. Yeah, no, that is. Yes. Yeah, South of Midnight's a first party. Yeah. South of Midnight, Doom, and Fable. Those are three pretty strong first party drops for next year. So that's why I'm not trying to be overly critical. I hold everybody to this. I'm like, don't show me fake footage. Don't show me a cinematic that like is like somewhat representing gameplay, and don't do this no release window, no release date thing. Like, if you do a teaser trailer like Gears, I let you off the hook. I'm like, that's fine. You want to get everybody excited about Gears? They did it with Wolverine. That's fine. When you show me this much gameplay and you got no release window, or you're 1 year away from coming out and you have no gameplay, I just immediately get like, I'm just worried. I'm like, these are all red flags and things we've seen with other games that lead to disappointment. And that's why I'm like, Xbox doesn't have to do this anymore. They've got so much property that they can leverage. We don't need to do the thing where we show a game way too early and then it ends up not being like that when it finally shows up.
I think Fable is going to be great regardless. I do think that they are heavily emphasizing the cinematics, right? Like, those look like in-game cinematics potentially. You get some gameplay snippets, like her walking up and talking to a vendor, or her walking through the woods and stuff like that. I do think that that's real gameplay. I don't think that that's fake or simulated, but I think that they're very much curating. They're very much picking the shots they want to use. It's no HUD. You know, it looks like maybe a God of War trailer or something like that. And I think that they're being very particular about what they want to show. And that's probably because they just want to make it look as good as humanly possible. Is it going to look that good when you actually sit down and play it? Probably not. Is it still going to look more than serviceable? And is it going to be a great game? I think so. I'm fairly confident in that. I'd be very surprised if this game was a bust based on what we've seen so far. I mean, pretty much everything would have to be fake. And I don't think that it is. I think it's just kind of, again, those dials are being turned up. They're specifically showing you stuff that looks the best as it possibly can. I do think your concerns about Perfect Dark are very valid with how much of that game that they showed. I mean, that could just be an entirely fake gameplay sequence, in the same vein as like the quick avowed thing that they showed with like him doing the hand insignia or whatever. That gave us an idea of what that game was, and then that game doesn't even look anything like that. Like, obviously that was fake, or that wasn't something that they had actually created in the game engine, in the game world. So, could they do that with a sequence this long? Like I said, they did it. EA did it with Mirror's Edge, so I wouldn't necessarily put it past them. I hope it's real because it looks amazing. Like, I want to play this game and I want it to look like this. And I don't really find any enjoyment out of being super cynical or critical of it at the current time. I think it's just kind of like a wait and see thing of like, you showed me this. I hope this is what the game looks like. If it does, we're talking about a 9 out of 10 easy, like an absolute banger. Everybody's going to show up for that. Everybody's going to think that is awesome if it plays anything like how that looked. But for now, we'll wait and see. Like, I'm not gonna lose my mind to be like, oh my God, Xbox is gonna come out with the best game ever made, the game of the generation, all that stuff based on that footage. Because like, I don't know. I'm just gonna say like, that looked amazing. We'll see if the follow-up showing looks as good and if that's really what the game is.
What did you push back, and I thought it was fair pushback, but I want this to be part of this show too, is I was really surprised, maybe even a little, not super disappointed, because it was such a strong showcase, but the lack of Towerborn and 33 Immortals really surprised me, because those are also coming this year, and I think they're great additions to the lineup. They're not AAA bangers, but they're really getting a lot of, I think, especially 33 Immortals was getting a lot of praise from people, and Towerborn was the one I thought, oh, that's going to get shadow drop. Like that one guy said, he knew the shadow drop, but he didn't want to spoil it, so he like kept it to himself or whatever. And the shadow drop, as far as I could tell, was just like free content in Starfield or new content in Starfield. So yeah. You had some pushback though when I said, man, where was Towerborn and 33 Immortals for this show, since they are coming out this year?
I think that if you include those in this showcase, they immediately by default become the lowest production value games in the showcase. Save for one that I thought, I did think the showcase had one that was kind of out of place, which was called Winter Burrow. It was the mouse game. I just thought that was a weird inclusion in this showcase. But I do think that absent that, the kind of tone here and the level of production value that they had with all of these games was like high. Even with games like Mixtape and South of Midnight, like that, or Wu Chang is another great example, that are smaller games, Flintlock, like they all showed out. They all looked amazing. Like Mixtape, again, is from that Artful Escape studio. Clearly, I think you would agree, the production value from Artful Escape, as amazing as that game looked, it was more of a like 2D indie looking game. They've elevated that enormously with what this game looks like, with the animation style of it. I don't even know what to describe it as. It almost looks a little bit like kind of like that Harold Halibut look, but like a different kind of style of movement. That looked amazing. I can't wait to play that game. The fact that is going to be a part of my Game Pass subscription, I'm so excited about that. But I just think they wanted to come out with blockbusters. They wanted to come out with 5-star showings. I think that adding Towerborn and 33 Immortals, maybe Towerborn more so than 33 Immortals. I think 33 Immortals is a fantastic looking game. Would it maybe brought that down a little bit, not in terms of game quality, but more like production value? If you want to say that it's weird that they didn't show them at Summer Game Fest at all, like they could have given Jeff 33 Immortals and Towerborn If you said that, I would be like, yeah, I agree with you. I don't know why they wouldn't give Jeff 33 Immortals and Towerborn if they didn't want to do it in the Xbox Showcase. Kind of get out ahead with those and be like, these are the games that are coming like imminently. Here's stuff to get excited about now, and not even later in the year. Yeah, I think that would be valid if you said that they could have done that there if they didn't want to sort of dilute the quality of the Xbox Showcase. There's also the concern of length. Like, you add the Black Ops 6 Direct to the end of this thing was what, like, basically approaching 2 hours, and that's a lot of time to ask of people. So, I mean, I think there were multiple factors, but I don't really have any substantial problem with them not including those games.
I want to push back on one thing. Someone says Jeff would rather show mobile crap. But again, you're acting like he's going out and picking that. He is putting on display the people that are willing to pay for the spots and the slots. And we do know that mobile games, they have a habit of spending tons of money to be included in stuff like this. So, like, you're acting like Jeff is going out there and saying, yeah, I don't want to show anything good. I just want to show mobile games. Like, he is kind of at the mercy of whether or not people want to be involved. That's why I keep coming back and saying that, look, he's going to face the same challenge at E3 faced. Like, you're at the mercy of people that are willing to show up. And if they're not willing to show up, then what are you going to do?
But he needs to be careful, because the criticism that he's getting for both of his shows, Game Awards and Summer Game Fest, that it's starting to just be riddled with ads disguised as, announcements, is valid. I mean, he needs to be very, very careful, or he's going to start to become less relevant, because the percentage of obvious advertisements, paid for advertisements, that aren't like actual announcements that are part of the momentous occasion of the show is rising. And I think that's because it's starting to become more of a commercial event, a commercial enterprise. And so, like, we got those figures of like what it costs to show a game. And obviously stuff also came out of like, if you're From Software, he's gonna be like, give me your game and I'll show it. Like, you don't have to pay me. Like, I want to show Elden Ring, like I'll do it for free so that we can have that moment. You're doing me a favor by bringing notoriety to the show. So, like, in some cases he's going to do that, but I think those instances are going to become more few and far between. And again, he just needs to get very, very careful about, if people start to really feel like the narrative is shifting on these shows and they're just riddled with ads and it's just a mobile game ad fest, we're going to see 10 minutes of, it's not a mobile game, but 10 minutes of Valorant footage. Yes, it accompanied an announcement coming to console, but like, people are like, this is not what I come to this show for. And then a lot of the NetEase stuff and a lot of the, like the chicken game, the chicken ad was so funny. Oh my God. With Ken Jeong. I actually enjoyed that because that was just stupid funny. But like, if that ad had been not as comedically amazing as it was, then that would have been just a snooze fest. It would have been like, you're wasting my time with ads for games that I don't want to play. Thankfully, it had some entertainment value to it. But like, the shows are becoming more and more of that. And the more that consumes the show, the less people are going to want to pay attention to it. So I do hope that he's careful about that, because then, it's going to undermine the whole kind of festivity of the season. And you're right, everybody's just going to go do their own thing, and it's going to be even less interconnected under that umbrella.
Well, people need a dose of reality, though. Go watch any live event. Go watch the Oscars. Go watch a live sporting event. It's incredibly expensive. Like, it isn't fair to compare him to Microsoft, who can basically boot up, put it on their own channel. It's all produced in-house by them, and then they obviously reach out to third-party partners to say, hey, we want to include you. And I think Xbox is going to be able to continue to leverage that, because I think their showcases are always going to be very big and good now that they own so much property. But I think that turns into like such an unfair comparison. It's like, it's a live event that's so expensive. The Oscars, sporting events, like, you're getting riddled with advertisements. And I think we're under maybe a bit of a delusion to think that he can just kind of do whatever he wants. And that, I think, is the challenge, is he's trying to put on something that is from an era of time that gamers, especially people who consume digital entertainment, we're very, very much quick to say, ooh, gross, commercials. Like, if I watch a live sporting event, or whenever I'm on vacation with my kiddos and we're like watching TV in the hotel, I'm always struck by how many commercials there are. I'm like, this is nauseating. And I have friends that are always talking about all these funny commercials because they watch soccer all the time. So they're always seeing commercials. I'm like, I never see commercials. So I think people need to remember that we are dealing with a little bit of different territory when someone like Keighley's trying to put on a big, huge live event, comparing that to, Xbox putting on a showcase that's, largely they're footing the bill in-house because it's their studio space, and it's Phil and it's Sarah Bond and Matt Booty. They're all employees, so it's like, you don't got to pay those. You don't got to pay appearance fees for them.
I think it's also just a slow year, and Xbox hoarded and held all the games for themselves so they could have an amazing showcase. And I don't think Jeff can be faulted for that. I think it's multiple factors. Like, I'm not saying that it's Jeff's fault that he didn't have any games to show. I'm just saying that he needs to manage perception about the shows becoming just riddled with ads and 80% paid for advertisements for mobile games and stuff. Because that discourse is not going to go away unless he can manage that. And the only way to manage that is by orchestrating and curating the show in a certain way. But I do think, it is definitely a slower year. Like, last year was ridiculous in terms of the output of high quality games that we got and the output of games that we got in general, and we were commenting that the entire year. So for people to expect the same this year is just not realistic. It seems like we're going to reload, reboot, and it's going to happen again in 2025. We're all here for that. This year is certainly nothing to scoff at in terms of the output that we're getting. I mean, some things that we didn't mention from the Xbox showcase. The new Life is Strange game, that's fantastic for Life is Strange fans, and I know there's a lot of them, and they're avidly a part of that fan base and love anything that comes from that IP. That game's just going to be coming later this year in the fall to Game Pass. That's great for Xbox. And then the Diablo expansion, which I think focuses on probably one of the more compelling aspects of the story, the mother and daughter that were involved with Lilith in some way, and continuing the daughter's story. I don't remember her name, sorry, but that cinematic really spoke to me, and I thought that was again phenomenal storytelling from Blizzard, and that's coming later this year. Unfortunately, it's not part of Game Pass because the game's a part of Game Pass. You got to buy the expansion for $40, but that's still a great offering for them to have later this year. And so I think that's why I said earlier, I think the second half of the year belongs to Xbox, and this is a comeback. Because you can just look at the other showcases and see that it's going to be a slow year, not including Nintendo. When I say Xbox's year, I'm more talking like the console war, even though that doesn't really exist anymore. But I think you can look at the other showcases, you can look at Jeff's, and you can look at the state of play. You still think something else is coming from PlayStation, that they're waiting until they see the whites of Xbox's eyes, I guess, to open fire. I don't know. But you're inclined to believe that. I think that if they had something, they would have brought it to the most important time of the year to show it. I think the fact that they really just have Astrobot and Silent Hill is why we saw Astrobot and Silent Hill. They may have something up their sleeve, but I do think that Xbox has shown they're going to show up in the latter half of this year, unless all these games
don't forget about Concord, dude. A 5v5 hero shooter, Kirk. We need more of those,
Stop.
It's going to have its beta at the same time that Valorant and Marvel Rivals comes to the consoles. That's such a good time to be.
You have a pattern of being more credible than me on this program. Don't ruin that.
I'm being sarcastic, dude. Concord's in so much trouble. Dude, oh my god.
Valorant? Are you kidding me?
The same month. No. It's so bad.
That month's gonna be wild between Valorant, Concord, and Marvel Rivals.
Oh
my god. And isn't something else? First Descendant. First week of July, First Descendant, free. Not the same genre, but still. I mean, there's so much free bullcrap coming in July. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. Yeah, wow.
I want to get your thoughts on Starfield, though. We haven't touched it. We haven't talked about it. Let me show this trailer while you're talking about it. I'm like, please be Phantom Liberty. Make this game something that I want to come and put time into, because they gave me 60 FPS on my Series X. It's like, these guns look cool. These environments look cool. What did you think about this Shattered Space DLC trailer?
I thought it looked fantastic. I loved how much they seem to be diving into almost like Alan Wake control type, disturbing type pseudo horror
Prey.
vibes.
It reminded me a little bit of Prey too.
Prey's a good shout out. Yeah. It didn't seem out of the same game. You know, like with the horns, like wasn't doing that. It wasn't doing that at all. Like they're clearly trying to do something different with this expansion, and I think that differentiation and sort of uniqueness is what resonates. Like they did a very, very good job of that with Skyrim, with Dawnguard, and the other expansion, making the vibe of those like feel like very much from the rest of the game different. And I think that bodes well for this. You mentioned Phantom Liberty. I think Phantom Liberty is another great example, like setting a tone of like, no, this is an action spy thriller. Like that's what this is going to be. And that kind of changed the whole narrative of that game. Obviously, they overhauled a lot of other aspects of that game. So that contributed to that narrative and that image kind of facelift. But it seems like Bethesda's kind of doing that in their own way. They're probably not going to be as effective and decisive with it, but like they dropped a big update. Yesterday? Yeah, yesterday. So that's gonna, go to the overall improvement of the game. Obviously, this expansion looks really, really cool, tonally, narratively, aesthetically. It could be a great addition to the experience that is Starfield. I already enjoyed Starfield. Like I already thought it was a good time. So I think this can only go upward in terms of the quality of this game. I don't think that they're going to abandon it. I think they're going to continue to spend time on it and make it better. That's just something that Bethesda does. You can see their commitment to doing that with their projects and their games by just like what they've been able to do with Fallout 76. Obviously, that got a great shot in the arm from the show, but like they've been working on that for years anyway, even without that. So I think it's a no-brainer that they're going to make Starfield as good as they possibly can. And ultimately, it may not be everything that was originally promised, but it's going to be a great game regardless.
I don't disagree with you. People are saying it won't be their 2.0 moment. There's people in chat saying they've already done updates that have completely changed the game. I'm going to wait until the very last moment. It's what I did with Cyberpunk. I'm like, listen, if you want me to come back, I'm hoping this lands fourth quarter. They can spend the next 6 months continuing to make good changes, lay that groundwork. I really want to play this game. I want to have a reason to turn on my Series X. And I keep promoting Hypercharge. Everybody go buy Hypercharge on Xbox, okay? I know it's been on Switch and Steam for a while. That game's awesome. Give them some love. It's such a fun game. I played it with my kiddos. It just harkens back to just silly split-screen fun. As soon as my kids saw action figures that they could customize, they wanted to play it. But I want this game to be a reason to turn on my Series X. Give me that 60 FPS. I feel like it's a pretty game. I do feel like sometimes it looks a little old, but for the most part, I feel like a lot of the environments, especially in this trailer, they look very... I tell you what it is. It's more artistically driven. It doesn't feel like they're trying to wow me with next-gen graphics. They're setting a tone with art direction, which I consistently think that'll win me over. Like Hi-Fi Rush, I think is going to look great in 10 years because of the art direction. We don't always need everything to be photorealistic. So I'm really wanting this to turn things around for me with Starfield because I saw so much potential in the game. I put 110 hours into Fallout 4. Like, this game should hook me and make me want to play. But Phantom Liberty, funny enough, redeemed Cyberpunk, and it made it impossible for me to come back to Starfield because it just... Cyberpunk's Phantom Liberty was just such a superior style of, like, let's do RPG shooter. And I think Starfield could be that. I think it could turn around for me with this DLC.
Yeah, I think just there's a level of intentionality and of a bespoke curated experience like that they want to provide to the player that I think was kind of missing with Starfield. Like they had that vision, and clearly you have like the retro futurist type of, it almost feels like old like 80s movies like Alien or whatever, where it's like tech that looks kind of retro, but it's supposed to be in the future, and it has kind of this kind of worn look to it. It looks like, a phone that's like way too big, or a computer that takes up a room or something, like, and that was cool. Like that was like an aspect of Starfield's identity, but like it was kind of just like that vibe and that aesthetic, and then like exploration and conquering the universe and the mysteries of the great beyond and whatever, and it didn't really like cohesively come together. Like it was kind of just a like, make what you want of it, go explore, go be Captain Kirk or whomever, and go seek out lands that have never been explored before. This seems to be like, no, you're going here, you're doing this, this is the narrative here. Something's going on. We're going to convey a scripted narrative story to you that you can then make into your own adventure, and that has certain notes and certain atmosphere to it that we're hitting, very effectively. I think that's going to feel different. Unfortunately, it's just an expansion, right? So it's not really going to impact the rest of the game. These updates are kind of another ancillary thing or a supplemental thing. But, like, they've done a great job with this before. I mean, I think of Shivering Isles expansion to Oblivion. Tonally and atmospherically and setting-wise, very different to the rest of Elder Scrolls Oblivion. And that's what made it so fantastic, is like it almost felt like playing another game, that expansion. It was just very, very good, very high quality, had its own story where you're the protagonist, you go all the way through, kind of save the world type of narrative, with interesting characters that you really didn't encounter in the main story. I'm looking for something like that. I'm looking for something to set this game apart, where it is going to have that kind of caveat or negative of like, well, yeah, it's not, you kind of have to go find this. You have to start the game and then go to here and then you can start it. It's a particular quest line or whatever. But once you get in that, it's, 15 hours of whatever the Shattered Space is going to be, or more than that.
Right.
And that's really, really cool and worthwhile. I think that's going to be a great add-on to this game that kind of makes it more of a value proposition, more of a selling point.
Well, we have a super chat from Benjamin, says, Starfield's mod load capacity is 100 gig. Let that sink in. I don't really care about the mods. I want, like, as he said, I want curated content from Bethesda. That's what I like. That's what I loved in Fallout 4. That's what I loved in Skyrim. And now we're hearing, I got Avowed up on the screen, okay? We're hearing reporting now from Drummer Mike in chat that they just confirmed on the Xbox podcast that there will be a third-person option in Avowed, which, okay, you just increased my interest. You really did. Because I'm telling you, the minute you go into third person, if the combat's a little clunky, I think that's more tolerable in third person. In first person, if it feels clunky, I feel like that really... I'm already not thrilled about it being first person, and then if it's clunky on top of that, that's a huge turnoff. I much prefer these types of games to be third person. So my interest in Avowed just went up hearing that. Apparently they did a deep dive into gameplay as well. I'm going to try to get that up on the screen for you guys.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Because this is a game that I continue to say it looks like you could have a fun time with. Now, is this deep dive going to have, like, the devs on screen and stuff, or is it literally just gameplay? I'm curious. I don't mind if the devs are on screen, but people are generally going to want B-roll. While I'm doing this, Kirk, give me your thoughts on, there's this image floating around, and you obviously have seen these, the console warriors are out here spreading around this image. Half of the games at this event, half were multiplat. What are your thoughts on people sort of saying that takes the game down a peg? Where do you land on that?
I mean, I think that criticism is slightly valid. Like, I think that it would be much more hard hitting if Xbox had stuck with its initial strategy, and all of these games that are first party were exclusive, and you couldn't play them on PlayStation. I think that's what people have grown to expect. That's what Xbox set as their own expectation when they launched the Series X, and they said we're going to compete. I mean, I've spoken at length about this. I went on my my rant about how I bought into the Series X. That was the first time that I bought into Xbox, and I believed that when they said they were going to go to bat and they were going to provide all these experiences, they aren't necessarily failing to deliver on that, because I'm still going to get all these games on that console with that subscription that I have, Game Pass. But the console isn't necessitated for it, because they aren't exclusives in the way that Sony first-party games are exclusive. And I do think that's, slightly a negative, or a side, caveat is probably a good word, to the kind of good news and the pomp and the blockbuster effect that this showcase had. But you also can't ignore the fact that, like, even though you can buy these games on PlayStation, the way they kept hitting after trailer after trailer after trailer, play it day one on Game Pass, play it day one on Game Pass. You and I had both, had some level of consensus thinking that they might walk that back just a little bit for some games. You might not get every single game from Activision, Blizzard, or Bethesda day one on Game Pass, sure, you're going to get your Halos and your Gears, right? I don't think that they would walk that back. I think they'd want to stay true to that message of like, if it's Xbox branded, you're getting it day one. But, you know, to get games like Mixtape or Expedition 33 or South of Midnight, Flintlock, day one, like that maybe isn't promised in perpetuity, and they're giving it to us. You know, and I don't know if that's to the detriment of Xbox long term. I don't know if that's a good business decision, but it's great for me as a consumer. It's great for me as a Game Pass subscriber who has Game Pass for the next 2 years, you know, all paid for and everything between discounts and Microsoft rewards. So as an Xbox gamer and a consumer, I'm excited for that. They're giving me tons of value. They're giving me tons of great games on that subscription that I already have. And if I only had a PlayStation, I'd have to buy each and every single one of those if I wanted to play them. We were just talking about Avowed. I'm still not necessarily sold on that game, but because it's showing better than it did in the spring, I'm probably going to jump in and try that game. No risk involved because I get to on Game Pass. I just get to play it.
Thank you.
Like that's an amazing value proposition there.
Yeah, thank you, Drummer Mike. Yeah, 10 minutes and 30 seconds in, they just showcased the fact that obviously there's no combat shown here. They toggle into third person in this sequence. I'm going to say while Kirk was saying all that, you know, I think that's the viewpoint of like the third party, you know, is Xbox going third party? I don't think it takes away from a showcase if you have third party or multi-plats. That doesn't bother me. I said the same thing about PlayStation because the average consumer doesn't care, right? Now, if I want to talk about Avowed's gameplay, though, that we watched that was back here, I think my main issue with this combat is the lack of impact. I don't see it. You know what it reminds me of? It feels like I'm playing a top-down isometric game, but I'm in the first-person perspective. A lot of the times when you're playing a game like Diablo, you'll swing and swing and swing, and you'll see maybe like a flash of light on the character, like these guys are lighting up, but they're not physically being impacted by the sword. The sword just kind of goes through them, and there is a lighting effect. There's maybe a little bit of blood that comes out, but I want to see their body physically respond. Like there needs to be impact, player feedback of these swings. I think it's way more noticeable in first person. I would love to see this sequence of combat in third person because it still feels very much like you're swinging through the enemy. You're not actually hitting them, and I think that just in third person or in any kind of melee-based combat, I want to see that player impact and player feedback. I would love to see these sequences in third person.
I still think the biggest enemy of this game is Skyrim. Like if you make a game more than 10 years after Skyrim and it doesn't look or play better than Skyrim, you're in trouble. And I think it'll be fine, but I think if they can't make a better game than Skyrim, then it starts to it cuts into the game kind of justifying its own existence. When these are studios that have worked on the same IP before, and people know very well that Obsidian made New Vegas, and a lot of people consider that the best Fallout game. So like the comparisons are gonna happen. Like you can't avoid it. And I just think Skyrim's too good a game, and they're coming out with a game more than 10 years later, almost 15 years later, that doesn't look like it can compete. And hopefully it'll have some narrative hooks and some, you know, choice type stuff and some RPG type stuff. I know people are really into, is it Pillars of Eternity? Is that what they make?
Yep.
I know people are really into that franchise. They're saying this is just that in first person. Like, don't compare it. You know, hopefully the sort of core element and characteristics of that franchise can shine through so this can kind of be a unique experience. But I do think a lot of people are going to come out and be like, this is just like a worse Skyrim. And they'll be reductive in that way. The same way they were reductive of like a Skull and Bones. And they said, oh, this looks like a mobile game, or you just sail around in a ship. Like, that's just how gamers are. Like, they render a verdict very quickly on games like this. And I do think that Skyrim is Avowed's worst enemy in that regard.
I really think the main takeaway, too, from the showcase, I really think we should put this on display. I really think we should spend some time talking about how ugly the man is in Fable. Like, I think that it's not fair to make, you know, the man just so ugly in this Fable. I'm just kidding. I'm curious what you thought about, did you see the Phil Spencer interview with IGN? Have you seen these clips floating around? Okay.
I didn't, no.
So no offense to the guy that they're using in this trailer. I'm being stupid, you know. I do think that now that you get better looks at her face, people can see like, oh, yeah, the actor that they modeled her after is very pretty, and she looks like her. It's not some awkward, you know, picture that you can circulate. I think they did a better job of showcasing her face in this to make it look like, hey, she doesn't look terrible.
Also, they're going with like a more like gritty, rustic type of British humor for like the tone of this, and like that kind of gets into showcasing kind of like the dirty, grimy nature of like peasant life.
Yeah.
And so I think like that's what that first trailer was really hitting at, is like sometimes her face is going to be dirty, or her teeth are going to look funny, or whatever. She just got into a fight, you know, like, and they were kind of hitting that like in a humorous way. And so it's very weird for people to be like, oh, why does she look like a supermodel right now? Like, that's not funny. That's not humorous then, if the woman is always just beautiful. Like, they were trying to hit certain humorous notes with the actor from the first one, the farmer giant guy that's so funny from IT Crowd. I forget his name. I apologize. But like, they're trying to hit that tone, and I think they're doing a really effective job of that. You said you even like this new trailer better. I think I like the first one just a little bit better, maybe because of that actor's delivery doing the narration. But yeah, it's very hard to hit that humor, like especially that very, very British characterized humor, and also nailing kind of the lineage of Fable, you know, like making it feel like Fable. That's even harder, right? Is like, there's been 3 games in this line, in this franchise. They have their own distinct style, their own distinct type of humor and satire, and they seem to be nailing that and innovating on that. And so like, you're doing all of that, and then people are criticizing you for things that don't matter. And it's like, do you guys not see what they are able to do? Like, even if they're not showcasing like really raw gameplay, like, there's a lot of promise here. So I'm more than willing to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt and be like, until you give me a reason to not be excited, I'll be tentatively excited. And then, you know, hopefully the game is as awesome as everything that you've shown so far. I think I'm going to be laughing my butt off when I'm playing this, and I'm probably going to think it feels pretty good too.
Yeah, if Fable delivers on the gameplay, if they let me play that third-person action RPG that they're kind of showing us in these trailers, and then it also has kind of the depth of like the Fable RPG and the decisions that you're making and, you know, the outcome. Like, I was never really big into Fable, but what I'm seeing looks awesome. I don't have Fable up right now. I've got Indiana Jones. So yeah, I'm not necessarily concerned. I'm always of that opinion of like, let me see gameplay, because the more we've seen of Avowed, I'm like, oh, the combat looks like there's not a lot of impact. And then the more we see of Indiana Jones in first person, I'm like, yeah, I really think you guys should have gone third person and just said, listen, if you're going to compare us to Uncharted, go for it. Like, Uncharted's inspired by Indiana Jones, so who gives a crap?
Let's have that conversation. What is this fascination with the fact that Indiana Jones should be in third person? Like, I don't understand it. It's been ever since it was revealed at the developer direct. People are like, oh, this game should be in third person. Why? Why is it any worse in first person? And also, why do you want a studio that is known for making excellent first person games to not make an excellent first person game? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Where is this coming? Is it just the idea that, oh, we had Tomb Raider and Uncharted in third person, so our brains are like conditioned now? Like, where does that come from?
No, I think I'm going to try to answer it, because I think what you're saying is fair. I don't want a studio to step outside of their wheelhouse and then end up making a bad game. Like we saw that with Redfall, right? The studio was like, we don't really want to make a multiplayer game. We're not really equipped for it. So I certainly don't want Machine Games to step outside of their wheelhouse. But I'm gonna try and explain why that people just assume this would be third person. I think there's a history of games like this where you have little shootouts, slapstick, kind of punchy, almost like everything set up to be comedic stunt, you know, like, oh, get out of the way of the boulder, get out of the way of the box, right? Use the whip and swing. That, I think, is what they are capturing Indiana Jones expertly, because people are like, this is cheesy. I'm like, have you ever watched the movies? Like, they're super cheesy, but they're fun. They're a fun romp. And I think that's why I think people want to see, if you're going to have Indy running from a boulder, or Indy swinging on a rope, or Indy sneaking around, that just feels better in third person. I do think that there's just a history of there's a history of that already in gaming. Is that fair? I don't know if it's fair or not fair, but I think that's why people came to the table with that expectation. I think you're right, though. It'll probably be better coming from Machine Games, not stepping outside of their wheelhouse. Like, it'll probably feel good, because some of the shots of him like throwing a hammer at somebody or punching or, you know, using the whip, I think that's going to feel very Indiana Jones. Because if you watch the movies, I mean, he's getting in these rock'em sock'em duke outs with people, and it ends up being, I think, very, very fun in that setting and in that time period. And if this game can capture that feeling in first person, I'm okay with that. I just think it's just fun to play a game where you see your character doing the crazy stunt. I don't think the stunts impact as strongly when you're in first person. If you're running from a boulder or swinging across an open chasm, I think that feels better when you can see. Whether it's Tomb Raider or Uncharted, I think they prove you're executing the action in a better way when you can see it happening. First person, you lose all that field of view. You just kind of, it's almost like you're up against the glass. It doesn't feel like you can kind of see what's going on. That's my best way to give a take on it like that.
I guess. I mean, if you take like a studio like Arcane, though, I think they've done a very good job of showcasing movement, and especially like supernatural style or like beyond human type movement in first person, and that was fairly satisfying. I think you're coming at it from like a very grounded analytical approach, and I do genuinely appreciate that. Like, I think your explanation is really good, and you like substantiated that well. I do see a lot of people in chat just saying like, I just don't really like first person. Like, it seems like I've underestimated, and this is something I've found like just by talking to people, how much people gravitate towards third person games over first person. But that's like so surprising to me, because there's so many good first person games. Like I mentioned, Dishonored, obviously this comes from the studio that makes the Wolfenstein games, which are fantastic. Borderlands, Destiny, Resident Evil, the most recent Resident Evil games, the Metro games, the Doom games. Like, there's so many fantastic BioShock. I don't think I mentioned that yet. There's so many fantastic first-person franchises. So I'm just wondering, like, do you guys just like not appreciate those or not want to play those? I mean, I personally don't have any problem with it being in first person. I can understand what you're saying about with it being Indiana Jones, how it might be just a little bit more enjoyable if it was. But like, also, I do think the answer to that is just that, like, they had one studio that they felt like they could entrust with this. they didn't pull a Konami basically and go get Bloober Team. They were like, you know what, Machine Games is the right studio, and they make good first-person games, so we're gonna let them do what they do. That's what I assumed this kind of was. Like, they had somebody that was ready to work with this IP, and they knew that the best way for them to make the game was to be in first person. I don't know who would have made it if not for Machine Games, so I think that's probably why this happened. But it does seem to me like I underestimated how much a lot of people just don't enjoy first-person games for whatever reason.
Yeah. I don't even know if it's that, though. I don't know if it's like people don't enjoy them. I think there's an expectation from action games is another thing I touched on. I think there's just expectations from action games of you want to see the action, and first person tends to be, oh, if you're going to do first person, it's because it's a shooter. I need to see the gun. I need to kind of have that tight managing of lanes and angles. And I think once you're not in that like first person shooter lane, it's like, why are we restricting the player to first person perspective? Same thing that we were kind of talking about with Avowed. It's like, I think it's in a similar vein of expectation, is you kind of want to see what's going on.
I can understand it with Avowed, and I even am inclined to agree with you, because I personally kind of liked playing Skyrim in third person, just to be able to kind of see my character, see them whirling their swords around and stuff like that. You obviously get like a wider field of view, I think, if you're in third person. But just for Indiana Jones, I don't know if it's just like, now that I think about it, like all the footage that they've shown in the trailers is very much focused on the atmosphere, the tone, like you said, very faithful to the movies and getting the vibe and the aesthetic of that authentically down to a T. Some puzzle gameplay, like some exploration gameplay. That's kind of what they've been showing off. I guess what makes me so comfortable with it being first person is like this is Machine Games. They made the Wolfenstein games. Wolfenstein 2 is excellent. It's like an 87, 88 on Metacritic. I expect there to be a lot of gunplay. I expect it to be heavy on first person shooter, heavy on shooting Nazis. They haven't really showed that off, so I can understand if people don't think that. I'm just going off on my own hunch, and what type of games this studio makes. But like, I think that's going to be the main gameplay. I think it's going to be more like half and half. You know, like you're going to have the exploration, you're going to have the indie stuff. But I bet a lot of this is like sneaking around, taking Nazi dudes out like clandestine style, or you're just going to be in head-on fights where you're going to be, you know, looking up over a box or something and shooting at dudes with an AK or whatever. I do think that a lot of the gameplay is going to be that, and I'm here for it. And for that, I'm glad that it is first person, because that can get very clunky when it's not. I think you and I have both played games before where the shooting is clunky and it's a third person game, and the cover is clunky because it's a third person game. I would love it if they got to just flex more of their refined like Wolfenstein first person shooter chops in this game. And I'd love it if it kind of, I get vibes that this could feel almost sort of like the Call of Duty World War II games, or like the old Medal of Honor games, actually, like with the music and the tone and everything. Like obviously it's Indiana Jones, so it's going to be most faithful to that. But I can see notes of those other franchises as well, and I trust Machine Games to deliver. So that's why I was so optimistic on it in the past. It even said that it might get a Game of the Year nom. The show, what they showed this time around wasn't too impressive. I think we both felt that way. The facial animations looked a bit off. The pacing felt a bit off, even of the cutscenes and the characters' movement. Them delivering lines was like kind of stilted. There was something strange about it, and I don't really know why. And I don't know how that's going to translate to the final product. But I would say we're kind of back to neutral. I thought the first showing was really, really extravagant and phenomenal, and then this showing was a little bit lackluster. So I think we're back to kind of like, we don't really know. We don't really know what the end result of this game is going to be like, and we don't know when the release date is. So we're still kind of waiting.
Yeah. I think this will be a holiday release, December. I hope it doesn't slip out of the year. I think that'll be a bit of a blow to go from all the hype to anything getting delayed. So I really hope that this and Avowed end up landing. I actually think the combat looks tolerable and intense. There's a couple punch sequences that people said, oh, punching in first person, you feel like you have T-Rex arms. I think they're really good at creating impact. Like, it's like wham, wham, wham. He's punching. He hits one guy with a banjo. So I think there's even going to be a little bit of the classic Indiana Jones slapstick in there, where he just grabs whatever's around him, sledgehammer, banjo, or whatever. So overall, I think we're both in an agreement that there is some measure of comeback. Asking the question that this stream was supposed to be like, is this a comeback for Xbox? I think they're back in a position where they can rally their community to excitement about the property, about Game Pass, but I also think they are definitely getting attention from people who are like, wait, I don't even have an Xbox, but man, that Black Ops looks amazing. That Doom looks amazing. So even
Can we talk a little bit about Black Ops? Like, the amount of effort that they're putting into this, like by like retooling the entire movement, like the fact that they said, like, we looked at racing games like Forza and we were like, wow, there's a lot of assists and like ways that you can change like how you interact with the game, like in terms of accessibility and preferences. Why can't we do that? Like, why is that only in car games? And I'm just like, after like the like pitiful showings that I feel like and a lot of the community feels like Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3 especially were like, Modern Warfare 3 just felt like a cash grab. Honestly, that was supposed to be DLC for that game, and then they changed it. Like, they went on record and said that Modern Warfare 2 was going to get 2 years of life, and then they rolled that back, and they didn't get enough criticism for that. For Treyarch to come out and be like, no, we're being serious. Like, here's all the ways we're trying to innovate. We're trying to give you the most blockbuster, tailored campaign experience that we have in a long, long time. Like, it feels like Call of Duty is trying to go back to its roots of being a fantastic franchise and not just trying to collect a check every year. Like, I was not bored during that whole direct, which is crazy. I'm not a Call of Duty guy. And like, this will be a conversation for another day, but like, does Call of Duty get back in the award picture? Like, they've won awards for their sound design and stuff like that before, but like, is this actually a quality? Like, this looks like a quality game. Like if we saw the gameplay of this and it wasn't Treyarch and it wasn't Call of Duty and it was just a 90s special operative like wartime first person shooter game and it didn't have the Call of Duty name on it, we'd be like, this looks amazing. Like this looks like best in show for the year type stuff. I was blown away. Like I was like, is Call of Duty back for real? Because it's just felt like ever since Vanguard, and some people might argue before that, it's just felt like it's like, yeah, another Call of Duty game, another year, like it's gonna be the top seller, like everybody's gonna play it, everybody's gonna complain about the multiplayer. They broke a bunch of stuff, they need to fix everything. Hopefully it'll be better next year. Yeah. And they just came out with so much confidence, and we're like, yeah, we re-looked at everything and tried to see how can we make this better. Yeah, I was really impressed. I really was.
Yeah, I told people that the tone of the direct was not trying to get me hyped up. It was trying to establish confidence in their decision making. It was like we've made all these decisions and we got down to the root of like omni movement on mouse and keyboard. I think is going to be at some level. It's going to be revolutionary for how people experience the PvP, just having that freedom of movement and that ability, especially mouse and keyboard. I think on console it's going to feel great, but I really think the evolution of movement in combat is going to look really interesting mouse and keyboard. Now, obviously, whenever you get into like a lot of the esports and stuff, most people are using controllers, so it'll be interesting to see if that happens too. Like if you see a change there, if there's more mouse and keyboard. The story alone, I got excited. I was like, okay, you got Robert Redford, you got all these this cast of characters. The one guy with the beard, he's excellent. He's from Boardwalk Empire. He's been in so many things. There's like he's just in real quick sequence. So they have like a big list of like A-list actors in this. And the fact that they made it a point in the direct to talk about how these were curated missions, like they're pushing against what they did in Modern Warfare 3, which was so much of that campaign was not curated. It was padded open mission nonsense. And Zombies is coming back. Like they're going back to 3-lane maps and PvP. Like I think this game is really going to get a lot of attention this year after the last couple of years. Like the Modern Warfare reboot, everyone celebrated. MW2, everybody felt like it was a step down. And then MW3 was just, in my opinion, a joke.
Garbage. Yeah. It's awful. Dude, when they talked about, like, saying that the missions, you would have, like, multiple ways to approach and do it. And, like you could come at it from, you could bribe, like, the guard and, like, go in that way. Or you could just go in guns blazing. I'm like, that's not Call of Duty. That's, like, sandbox stuff. That's, like, Hitman. Or, like, you're telling me you're going to be doing this in Black Ops? I'm like, there's no way. Like, this might be my favorite. This might be my favorite Call of Duty campaign. Like, I don't even know. Obviously, they're trying to sell it. They're trying to get you overhyped. So, like, I want to temper my own expectations. But, like, Call of Duty is already so action-packed and set-piece heavy that, like, that in and of itself kind of sells it. Like, that makes it cool. And so for them to put, like, really great video game elements into this and be like, yeah, play your way, like approach this mission your way. Like, do you want to like plan it out and go in this way and like bribe the enemy, or do you just want to like bring a rocket launcher and a machine gun? Like, what do you want to do? Like, that sounds like other games to me. Like, that doesn't sound like Call of Duty, and that sounds like other games in a great way, like good features of other games. And for them to incorporate that type of stuff, that to me like signals like, oh, you guys really looked at your formula and said, you know what, we could improve it. We don't have to just churn out the same thing iteration after iteration. Like, why can't we be up there with the acclaimed games that are getting all the recognition for the reasons that make those games great? We're going to incorporate that stuff into our game and be innovative.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what they do with it. Like, I'm so glad it's coming to Game Pass and I don't have to buy it and I can just play it, because I might just play the campaign and be like, that's one of the best military shooter campaigns I've ever played. You know, I don't know if I'll touch the multiplayer or if I'll love it, whatever, but like I just think that's all, like, everything's coming together for Xbox as far as Call of Duty, bringing it to Game Pass. It might be the best Call of Duty in years. You love to see it. Like, I think the sky's the limit. At worst it could be mediocre, but like the sky is the limit for like what that delivers on.
Someone says, I'm not sure what Lono's talking about here with mouse and keyboard, went right over my head. What they showcase with the Omni movement is that, like, you can prone and then, like, 360. And imagine being able to do that on a mouse and keyboard really, really quickly. It's one thing to have that level of freedom of motion on a controller, but I want you to think about, like, a highly competitive player being able to, like, dolphin dive, dive backwards, sprint sideways. You can sprint in any direction now, and you have that quick ability with a mouse to, like, spin all the way around. I'm telling you, I think that the Omni movement on mouse and keyboard is going to, I think it's going to completely change the way PvP at that level feels. Like, it'll certainly have an impact on controller, but I think that level of freedom of movement on a mouse and keyboard will be very interesting. But we've got to shift, though. I've got to go to, we're going to call this a Ubisoft forward waiting room, because I got to have the chance, like, stretch my legs, use the restroom, and have lunch, or I'm not gonna make it. So we're gonna head to a members only Ubisoft forward waiting room. We've been doing this with these showcases. It's a great reason to gift a member or become a member. So if you guys enjoyed this show with Kirk, his name will be clickable in the description. Give him some love. Give this video some love. Give it some likes right now. Push us past the current milestone that we're on the cusp of. And thank you guys so much for a huge day of gifted memberships. And I'm going to make sure his name's clickable in the description. It never saves it properly. Okay, it is. His name is clickable in the description. So
yeah, and if you're not a member, we did react to the Future of Play Direct, the Latin American Game Showcase, and the Wholesome Direct on Saturday. So if you haven't seen those yet, that's from Saturday. A bunch of amazing indie games shown. So if you can't hang around for Writer's Room, that is on my channel, and that's up as a very recent live. So check that out.
Yeah, so click his name in the description. If you can't come to the waiting room that we're going to go to right now for members, we're just going to hang out and wait to do Ubisoft Forward. Go to Kirk's channel, check out some of that stuff. You can throw it on, listen to it, like check out some of those games, add those games to your wish list. There's a link in chat in the Discord of where we're headed if you are in fact a member. Tons of members today, 125. I gifted the ones that I owed. You guys are well on your way to the goal this week. You're going to get another great scary game Friday night with me this Friday. So I'm going to start the member stream. Thanks so much for being a member. This is going to be a Ubisoft Forward waiting room to give me the opportunity to take a quick little break. And, we could maybe chat with Kirk for a little bit about what he expects to see there, what he hopes to see there. We're going to be doing that. We're going to be hosting that probably in about 45 minutes. We'll go over there about 30 minutes early, so I'll schedule that in a moment. And I'm going to end the previous stream. We talked about, is this a comeback for Xbox? And I'm going to end that stream now and bring people over with a redirect. And let me go ahead and change that thumbnail so it no longer says we're live.